kind of just fell backwards into this position where I was like, okay, well, crap, I can actually, maybe I can do something positive through this that is more than just having an outlet for myself and an opportunity to connect with other readers, but maybe connect non-readers with books that they don't know about it and make it more accessible in some way. So it's been really incredibly humbling and touching, frankly, to receive so many messages from people that haven't read a book in 15 years, found your page. I'm on my sixth this year.
All right, we got Sam, also known on social media as Hetty Reads. If you've seen Sam's videos, you've probably, like myself, laughed a lot. And I'm so excited, Sam, to have you on the show. It's been something I've been thinking about for a while. And when I reached out to you and you immediately said, yeah, I was super stoked. One of the things that is important to me about the content that you make is it's both funny, which is very inviting. And you also touch on important topics, which I want to get into here. And, you're cultivating, I think, a community and a brand that puts awareness on people reading important works of literature, but you're also having fun while doing it. And so if you're not following Sam currently, you can follow him at Hetty Reads on TikTok, on Instagram, I believe also Goodreads as well. Super stoked to have you on the show. I want to thank you again for your time, and let's have a blast here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me be here, man. I'm excited. I was really excited when you reached out. Kind of the same thing. I've been watching your content for a while, and it's cool to be involved, man. So yeah, let's get after it. Let's chat.
Yeah, so let's talk about Instagram for a little bit. You have seen a pretty incredible rise on Instagram. I talked to you about it a couple months ago, and it was something I think that you said just kind of happened out of nowhere for you. You've recently hit, I think, just under 100,000 followers or 100,000 followers. What has that been like for you? Because you previously were building pretty regularly and consistently on TikTok, and then this Instagram growth has just been pretty exponential and also fast. What has that been like for you as a content creator? Has it changed your approach? Kind of dive into that a little bit and talk to me about, kind of what that's done for you.
Yeah. So it's been interesting and fun and exciting and overwhelming at times, So I was doing it. I started in, I think, June of 2024. And between then and May of 2025, I accrued about 630-ish followers. It was 633 exactly as of May 3rd. I remember that because, every follower is really exciting, and it still is really exciting, and I never really got into this with any belief that I was going to grow some big community or, be able to have any kind of impact. It was more kind of like an outlet for me. I read a lot. My wife reads a lot, but not as much as I do. And I was just constantly blathering to her about books. And she introduced me to Nick Perry's page, which is Books Are Sick. And, by proxy of that, I got introduced to Kist and CJ and, all of these other folks and Tony, La Life on Books. And, I said to her, I was like, well, I can do this. And she was like, well, I didn't think you should do it. I just thought you might like it. And I was like, I do like it and I will do it. And, so for the next few months, I kind of was just trying to build out a list of oh, these are some things that I might be interested in talking about. And yeah, I kind of hit that May 3rd inflection point where I posted a video that was just 5 books for the fellas that want to read but don't know where to start. And it was just a random, I had no expectations that was going to go off. Right. And yeah, that's when it really happened. I remember that day specifically because I went to a little dinner party at my friend's house and this was happening on my phone and I was trying not to pay attention to it, but it was, I was like, holy shit, everything that I posted up until that point was 800 views. All of them were my friends. That was the engagement, was people in my life that followed me and were kind of half this is cool. And also, what is Sam doing? Sam reads. I didn't even know that Sam read. It's been really interesting. And kind of from there, keyed in on the formula that seemed to work. Hey, these curated lists with digestible bites that kind of give you enough without giving you too much. Like I said, it kind of got overwhelming at first. You feel like you need to keep up with all the comments and all the messages. And you want to give everybody, your time. Kind of had to step back from that a little bit. I was like, we can't keep that up, right? right? This can't be
Yeah.
everything. It's become this rewarding thing in a way that I never could have predicted. I know that we've talked about this and just, I know so many young men. I know I have so many nephews. I know so many friends of mine that are men that don't read. And, I want this page to be something that is encouraging everybody, not just men. But with that being said, statistically speaking, men aren't reading and young men aren't getting into that. So I kind of just fell backwards into this position where I was like, okay, well, crap, I can actually, maybe I can do something positive through this that is more than just having an outlet for myself and an opportunity to connect with other readers, but maybe connect non-readers with books that they don't know about it and make it more accessible in some way. So it's been really incredibly humbling and touching, frankly, to receive so many messages from people that haven't read a book in 15 years, found your page. I'm on my sixth this year. Parents have reached out. Like one of the first messages that I really remember was from a mother who said, my child has been reading for 45 minutes quietly in his bedroom, and like my household has changed.
Yeah.
She was like, thank you. She was
That's
like, and I was
amazing.
like, wow. I was like, that's incredible. And I think the book that he was reading was Red Rising. What a cool thing to, we all hope we can have some good or positive impact on the people in the world around us. And if you told me 10 years ago that mine might come by way of talking about books on social media, I would have thought that was absurd. But here we are, because I
Yeah.
lost touch with the reader in me for a long time and then re-identified with it a couple years prior to starting this up. And so, yeah, it's been fun, like I said, and exciting and overwhelming at times. All the things, all the things.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned a couple folks that obviously have been influential to you, and Michael Kist has directly been influential to me. Me reading nonfiction a lot to begin the kind of reading journey for me. Having watched a lot of his videos, I kind of had the same experience. My wife is an English teacher, and I remember asking for a bunch of books for Christmas a couple years ago after watching a lot of Mike's videos. And I remember reading How the Word Is Passed by Clint Smith, which is a book that tackles America's relationship with slavery and the history of slavery. And I read it in like 2 days. I remember like talking to her about it, and she's like, you should like post about it. And I'm like, nah, I mean, I just simply can't do that. Like, I have no interest in doing that. And I posted my first video, and it got like, I don't know, like 400 views. And I was like, you think back now, because like we've had
Yeah,
videos
that's
where
great.
you get like 1 million views or 600,000, and you're like, damn, like that video took off. But when you think back to those first videos and you get 400 views, you're like, imagine sitting in a room with 400 people listening to you. You know what I mean? It really is impactful.
No, at no point has it not kind of had that humbling feel to it. Even those first TikToks where like 10 people commented, I was like, wow, like 10 people, like, or like 4 people, whatever. Any amount of that is cool and exciting, So I've had that same experience for sure.
Yeah, and Tony, who is so I'm in his book club, and there's so many great people in there, and such a great taste in literature, and also Nick. I mean, he's just such I think truly from a male perspective, just a pillar for the reading community, and is so inviting. He interviews incredible authors and does so much work with his community. You talked about losing the reader in you, kind of over the years. What sparked you to find that again? And was it maybe a particular book? What was that experience like, finding your way back to becoming an avid reader?
Yeah. So I loved reading from a young age, and I was very lucky to grow up in a house where I was read to, and I had parents that read, so I always saw a book in my mom's hand. My mom is an avid reader. My dad is also a big reader. My entire family reads. So it was always there. I grew up on fantasy. The first, like chapter book, the first like real book that I read was the first Harry Potter, which came out when I
I
was
feel
in
like
fifth
that's
grade.
everybody.
It seems like the access point for so many people. I was in fifth grade when that book came out. So I look back, that's almost one of the most pure reading experiences I've had, because I'm still a fantasy reader, still a sci-fi reader, but so much of the stuff that I'm reading is either done or completed or it's in the middle, like, whereas that I read that first book in fifth grade and I grew up on that series, So, but my senior year, it was right after my senior year that the seventh book came out. I remember I actually dressed as Victor Crumb at the Northshire bookstore in Manchester, Vermont, and I wrote a Horcrux scavenger hunt for the children there. They were going around trying to find Horcruxes in the bookstore. Ender's Game, like as far as sci-fi, and some of these other things I loved, like Holes, all those books that were kind of classic to my age group. I'm 36, but like The Giver, and I read those. Some of these other books. I read Ethan Frome Rome by Edith Wharton was like kind of my first dive into like literature as a high schooler, and The Giver by Lois Lowry. Those were the books that I kind of grew up on. And then, I lived a very volatile lifestyle from the age of about 19 to 27, 28, 30. Dropped out of college, got very into jam bands, and started just traveling all over the country and frankly partying a lot, not living the most healthy, balanced lifestyle. It was fun. I had a lot of fun, but in that whirlwind that was, that decade or so of my life, reading just wasn't a priority. And just because of the way that I was operating as an individual, just I didn't have even like the bandwidth. I remember when I finally left Burlington, Vermont, where I lived for years, I re-identified with sleep and was like, oh my gosh, sleeping is awesome, And I picked up my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law convinced me to read, what was it? The Dark Tower series by Stephen King.
Okay.
Which is 7-book fantasy series, but it's kind of Western vibes as well. It's Stephen King brand fantasy where it's much grittier, much darker, and doesn't adhere to this more kind of contemporary world building, magic systems. It was really kind of unto itself within that realm. That was my access point back into reading. And then when it really started to take off for me was, there's all these classic titles, all these classic authors, Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath, like Frankenstein, whatever, Faulkner, all of these different people that I was like are so important to American literature and beyond, that we all know these titles, we all know these authors, we all are familiar, at least with the idea, not all of us, but so many of us are familiar with a lot of these titles. And I was like, well, I don't want to have gone through my life without indulging in that and
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
getting to become acquainted with that body of work. And through that, then I realized, well, there's all this contemporary work that's happening. There's all these people that are kind of speaking more to the world that I live in and have come about in, and thus kind of began that reading journey again, So it really kind of started with that one series by Stephen King, and then just kind of being like, I want to read these classics, and then holy there's so much to read. And now I'm just racing.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep up with it all.
Yeah, I recorded a video yesterday that I'm going to post either today or Monday. I started the video with like, I have made a complete mess of my TBR. And I got halfway through the video and I actually say in the video, I think I just need to like get some books off my TBR. I think that's actually what my problem is, because kind of like the angle of the video is like, help me kind of organize what I'm reading, because I've kind of put myself in a reading slump from having so much on my TBR. But to your point, like there's so much that I want to read. And when you think about all the books that are out there, you're like, well, I'm never going to be able to read all those books. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause you're never going to live long enough. And so that kind of brings me to what I typically start the show off with, but I just really wanted to talk about your growth as a creator. Is I typically start the show off with what you're currently reading. We kind of just back and forth, kind of just go through some of the stuff we're reading right now. Curious kind of what you have on the docket, what you've been skimming through, and what's caught your attention lately.
Yeah, so right now I'm reading Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. Are you familiar?
I'm not.
This will be one of my favorite reads, certainly of the year and just in general. Basically, it is about a 30-ish-year-old man that escapes from prison in Australia, and this is like a semi-true. I need to kind of do a little bit more research on that. It is fictionalized, but I believe much of this is pulled from his actual experience. And he escapes from prison, goes to India, lands in Bombay, and basically immediately becomes enamored with the vitality of the city and the people, and enamored with all of the good and like the positivity of spirit and the kind of community aspect that he discovers there. And he's on the lam, he's on the run, but basically really just immediately identifies with the tempo of this place and these people, and slowly becomes ingratiated into their lifestyle. And I'm about 250 pages in, but it's one of those books that within a chapter, sometimes, like, I'm a big believer, I give it 100 pages, before I even start
But you're a
really.
better man than me.
Yeah, maybe 50, maybe
No,
50.
I have DNF'd a book at like 7 pages. I'm like, be serious.
Well, okay. I mean, if I read it in 7 pages in, I don't like the writing, and I just already stylistically know that this isn't going to like be my vibe, I'll put it down. But if I feel like I like the writing and maybe the story, I'm not there with the story
Yeah.
yet, give it time. This is like an 800, 900 page book. So like right away, I was like, okay, this is definitely going to be a book that I vibe with. So absolutely loving that. And one of my kind of just in general pursuits is going to be moving forward. I don't consider myself an incredibly well-read man. I'm on that journey, right? And, it's a flexible term. What does well read
Yeah,
mean?
so what do you I talked to my wife about this. What do you, I guess in your own definition, consider it to be well read? Is it like reading really important works of literature or kind of building your own stylized canon? I'm also kind of on that exploratory journey as well of like what does it mean to be well read, and curious as to like what that picture looks like to you as you're, starting to paint it.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, there's people that would say I'm well read, and there you could make an argument for that at this point. To me, it's just I think a diversity in works, and both having like a solid base as an American in American literature, and maybe having read these kind of certain pivotal works that are kind of just ingratiated into our culture and into this world at this point. But then also going beyond that, because that's where it started. Like, oh, there's all this American literature. Well, there's this Irish literature. There's all this nonfiction. There's so much to learn. It takes many different shapes and sizes for me. I just feel as though there are still those canon works and those authors that I have yet to visit that I feel like are part of that journey for me. That, like, once I've kind of, and this is all silly and arbitrary. Like, you don't have to check certain boxes. Oh, done that. Now one step closer. But yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it really is just a diverse reading scape, and kind of, taking in as much as I can as it pertains to different experiences and different worlds, and, and yeah, just kind of laying that groundwork. I mean, do you have an answer for that?
No, I think diversity is important. And I know that there was a woman on TikTok that kind of stirred the pot earlier this year with talking about men who are, not diversely well read. And,
Oh, I remember.
yeah. And, I threw my 2 cents in, as I say, I'm built for the bullshit. So I'll go in on any controversy or conflict. One of the things that I think is important to be well read, and when it comes to diversity, it's not like you should read from other countries or you should read women authors. Like, I think those obviously are kind of things you should just be doing. Putting yourself in places and experiences and next to people that you in your everyday life don't interact with or can relate to, I think is very important. And I think especially for young men, which is this is just naturally going to kind of lead into what I wanted to talk to you about. So many young men are spending a disgusting amount of time online, which is interesting because where we exist is online, trying to get them to get offline. You know what I mean? Ironically, also, like podcast culture has become very toxic. And I think the internet as a whole is poisonous. And,
Uh-huh.
I think social media, again, ironically, is poisonous. But I think people that are on social media pushing narratives that are healthy and inclusive and welcoming. And, one of the things that I really hate is this performative, like, oh, men reading in public is performative. And I'm going to go on a little rant here. Like, everything is performative. Showering is performative. Like, walking
Yeah.
down the street is performative. Ordering a coffee is performative. Like, you want men to read more diversely and you want them to be well read. But then the second they're reading East of Eden in a coffee shop, you're like, oh, that's a performance. And it's like, so which one works for
Yeah.
you? Like, is
Yeah.
it, you want them to be well read, or you don't want them to exist in the space that you're existing in because you've created this culture of protectionism around the literature that you like? And again, I don't know this girl that posted about it on TikTok personally, but like, just didn't hit the way that you thought it did. And then also there
Yeah.
was this video of this girl who was like Yoko Ogawa, who wrote The Memory Police. I don't know if you read that book, but I thought it was a fantastic book. And I've thought about it so much since I've read it. I guess in one of her other books, there's like blatant Zionism, and she's like, she's a Zionist, so I'm not reading any more of her works. And it's like, that's kind of the whole point of reading, is to read people's points of views that differ from yours. And I think we've become a culture where we've just said, okay, like, if you're not going to align with my point of view, then I want nothing to do with you. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's the problem. That's kind of my thoughts on being well read, is like being able to explore and endure places, people, and experiences that are different from what you're comfortable with, and being comfortable being uncomfortable, I guess, is
Yeah.
kind of my answer there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And, also just reading is a personal experience. right? And in that video that you're mentioning, I think it was kind of taking shots at people who read this author or that author, and how is this expansive, and how is this, moving us in this direction. And like this space can be an echo chamber, but that's okay too, And I'm a part of that sometimes where I talk about titles that have already been talked about. Part of that is because I'm listening to creators that are excited about a book, and then I want to read it as well. My buddy Baba, I think, said potentially in response to that video, we're all kind of playing curated characters on the internet. And, none of us are that special. And, far be it from me to try and dictate what somebody else derives joy from. And we all are having a different experience within our personal life. And I've had a different exposure to diversity and a different just, life experience. And if somebody, is enriched by reading books that are sci-fi or maybe less, heady, whatever it might be, that's great. People are reading, and like all of these books that aren't given the same kind of credence with regard to like literary, splendor, whatever it might be, there's still so much to get from these other books that to somebody else is less than. And I absolutely abhor this notion that somebody needs to check this box or that, or I should be, selecting a title based on this or that. I do place emphasis on reading from a diverse palette of writers and experiences, and that's great. That is my choice to do that, but that doesn't mean that anybody else should be selecting on that basis. And I don't do it, like you said, for those performative reasons. And it starts to take on that feel when that's the narrative you're spinning through your content, is that if you aren't doing this, you're doing something wrong, which I just think is wrong. I think that's
Yeah.
wrong. But
One of the things that I get a lot of flack for, and, rightfully so, like, again, I don't care particularly what people say. I very much despise the rating system in the book space. I think it commoditizes the experience of reading. And also too, like, I very much believe, like, if you and I were in the same town, we'd have a beer, we'd hang out, we'd have a great time. You know what I mean?
yep,
But
yeah, we would.
there's there's books that, like, you have been like, this book's 5 stars, and I've been like, I would never read that. Does that mean I think that you're not well read? Does that mean I don't trust what you say? No, it's just I have very different tastes. I listen to death metal and classical music. I just listen to
Yeah.
very weird music, and
Yeah, yeah.
I love, like, weird, like, documentary style movies, and I read weird books. And so if you're like, hey, this book's 5 stars, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what 5 stars means to you. I want to know how that book made you feel. I want you to tell me, hey man, I just read Help Wanted by Adele Waldman. I thought that the way that these characters were fleshed out really made me feel like I could relate to them, or I thought the writing style was very forward and it was inviting for me, for someone who doesn't read a lot of books. Like, that's what I think people want, a shared experience, especially in the culture where people don't feel connected because of, like, we're all online. That's something where I think I'm trying to push away from things like Goodreads and StoryGraph. I'm sure they're great apps. I don't use them because I'm not interested in giving somebody a rating on a book. Like, if you go to my Goodreads, all my books are 0 stars. And so Goodreads probably hates me. You know what I mean? I've had publishers, which is kind of one of, like, the perks of the gigs, is, like, publishers will send you books. Some publishers will say, they'll follow up and be like, hey, like, are you going to post a review of this book? There's a book on this shelf. You can't see it, but it's called Rot. And the subtitle is An Imperial History of the Irish Famine. And it's written by an Irishman. And with all due respect to Patrick Scanlon, this could have been a Substack article. Like, it is
Uh-huh.
just him talking about how much he hates the British Empire. There's an entire
Yeah.
chapter about the 6 different types of potatoes the Irish grew. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they were like, hey, are you going to post a review? And I'm like, I don't think you want me to do that. They
Yeah.
have not sent me a book since. And so it's like, hey, if you don't want to work with me because I'm going to be honest about the work you're sending me, like, best of luck to you. Have a good time.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be genuine in the way that I approach literature, because I think it's under attack, and I think it's important that we force it to exist in spaces it deserves to exist in.
Yeah, and on that, I've said kind of point blank to certain publishers, sure, or like authors, like, I want to promote your work, but I also am not going to be dishonest. If you want to send me the book, I'll check it out, and I'm very grateful that anybody does that and even asks. That's so cool. I'm humbled that somebody would want to hear my take on it. But, I feel, my duty here, if you will, is more to be authentic and to be honest. Because there are people that, as crazy as it feels to me sometimes, like they put stock in what I have to say, right? So I've told people, like, yes, I'll check it out, but if I don't like it, I'm not going to do you the disservice that would be to post a view that is fully honest about it, because I don't want to anything that I do to you that has opened yourself up to me to be detrimental to your progress. But I also am not going to just read it and give some glowing review about something that I don't feel that way about. So I've kind of isolated myself probably from certain publishers in that way as well, because I don't have that bone in my body that is like, sure, yeah, I'll just, send me all the free books and I'll just say all the great things. Like I can't do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I work in sales, like that's my career, and my boss will always like bust my balls because I tell people on calls, and all our calls internally are recorded, and I'll say, hey, listen, like I am a not salesy. Like in my role, I'm probably the least salesy person on my team. If this product works for your company, more than happy to talk about it with you. If it's not a fit, then we can change course for this conversation. And my company being a sales organization, they're like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to sell something to somebody that doesn't need it. Like, I don't need a paycheck that bad. And I'm kind of curious about one of the questions here. Being, like you said, your voice holding credence to people, holding weight in terms of importance. People trust what you have to say. Has that in a way or at all changed what reading is for you? Like, do you feel when you're reading the book you mentioned earlier, are you stuck in this place where you're like, I'm not really liking this, but I kind of hyped it up online and now I'm kind of nervous about like going back for a video later and being like, I didn't really like this. Like, has it kind of infected the way that you approach books at all, or no?
I don't think so. I think it briefly did. I kind of had this moment of like, oh, people are watching. Now I gotta be serious or do this or do that. Or, okay, what was it about this that drew people in? And now I need to kind of curate, the Sam character, kind of fit that tempo. I don't think that it has influenced that too much. I'm okay with thinking something's great. Like right now, I just said like, oh, I'm loving this book. I think it'll be one of the best things I've ever read. If that's not true, that's the report that, the world will receive. And, I also just in general, like I stopped doing kind of my silly, skitty, comedy-esque,
Which
whatever
I
stuff.
I have gone back and watched that Pierce Brown video 500 times. Like that video had me crying.
I was very proud of that video, which
That
is silly, but I was proud of that one.
that video, Josh reads books.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we're in that group chat. Like he's a really good friend of mine. I've actually gone down to where he lives and spent time with him, and he's an amazing human being. And I sent that video to him and talked to him about that for like a half hour. I was in tears. Like it's such a good video. And kind of talk about why you got away from that kind of skit content. Is there a reason why, or you just wanted to kind of change things up?
Well, I mean, part of it is you see the things that people respond to, right? It's
Yeah,
hard to not allow
yeah,
that to dictate what you post, you know? So I've tried to just be like, dude, like you got here doing you, so do you? So I kind of had to take that step back. So at first I was like, people want more serious things. People want, curated book lists. People want this. But like if I just put my emphasis on doing that, I haven't read enough that I can just be banging out lists like that all the time. I like doing the book, the reviews. I love that because like you said, like I don't typically put a star rating on things. I will every once in a while be like, yeah, for
yeah,
me, this is a 5-star book, but it's not like that's not a staple of my page. I
yeah,
try to communicate how the book made me feel and in the impact that it had on me and the reading experience as I had it. But yeah, and then I've just kind of been like, you know what? I can't get rid of this wacky part of my personality because that's was at the root of it for me too, is that I just like doing that stuff and
yeah,
have fun doing it. And when that like silly mood strikes and I have the random idea, like I did like the Stephen King like It video recently, which whatever, the editor's room. I think it's easy to see what's successful and be like, okay, I need to stay within this niche, but I don't
yeah.
need to do that. So I've kind of taken that step back and been like, dude, this is your page to do with as you please. And it can take many different shapes and sizes. So that was a good experience for me to have, and also just coming to understand, because the internet can internet sometimes, and all of a sudden you're getting these opinions that, don't sync up with yours. And first you want to take it to heart, but it's none of that should be taken to heart. That's okay. I'm a believer that, like, if you post something I don't like, I don't feel, unless it's like crossing some sort of line that I feel like is worth further discussion, I don't need to go out of my way to say, I don't agree with that or I didn't like that book. When some people do that, and that's okay. Kind of just had to remove myself and, become less sensitive to that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I mean, I think I have kind of done better of re-identifying with what I wanted this page to be at first, which was all things books, whether it's silly, whether it's fun, whether it's serious, whether it's emotional, whether it's whatever it might be, so it's been good for me to kind of recognize that and just re-identify with what I was trying to do here.
What is that mission, I guess, moving forward? Like I recently talked, for the episode with Josh that's going to release next Tuesday. We kind of talked about where we want our content to go, and him and I text pretty much every day and talk about stuff like that. And for me, I don't want to do short form content like long term. I don't want to. I'm 35. I'll be 36 in a month and a half. Like, I don't want to be making TikToks at 45. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I've
totally,
started
totally.
to build up my Substack, and I just joined Bindery, which is been a great partnership, and I really want to focus on community based content, and that's kind of where my focus is. And one of the things, and I'm curious if you feel this, because you did talk about it a little bit in the way that your content is influenced. When you think about those followers, right? Like, there's probably a core that look forward to your videos. But it's often said, like, especially in the algorithmic anti-follower era we're in social media, like, only 20% of your followers actually see your content regularly. I don't know if you struggle with this or if it's influencing the future of what you want to do with your page, but how do I get people to still care about my content, but also care about the person creating the content? Because I genuinely do want to connect with them. And there's some people that, like, literally, like, I went from becoming mentioned next to Michael Kist as like and Josh as like the history book creators, right? Which is wonderful. And then I
Yeah,
started, I started
it's
following
good company.
Tony and, Nick, and starting reading more fiction. And Tony has just heavily influenced, and people in his book club heavily influenced my reading style lately. And so I'm reading a ton of like weird fiction and postmodern and stuff like that. And so a lot of my content has been that lately. And people are like, stop posting this garbage and post nonfiction books. And first of all, like, I don't know, like, I have the login and password to this page. I don't know if you know that, but
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so, is that something you think about? Is there anything that you kind of have on the runway of like what you want your content to morph into? Like, is it building community? Is it writing a book? Like, what is kind of the goal and the hope in the future of the content that you want to curate?
So these are things that I frankly haven't totally fleshed out my beliefs as far as what I want it to be. I definitely want to get into more long form stuff and create a more community based setting wherein I can only talk about the book so much within the format of what I'm doing, because I don't want to do spoilers and I don't want to do this. So, I'm joining Bindery as well. And I like that
Is this
because the
breaking news?
well, yes, yes. So I haven't actually made, but I'm in the process of kind of building that out. And I love the idea of having it be, it's like these are the people that are here and the people that take that next step to being
Yeah.
there. How can we build upon this and go deeper? And, so I want to do a book club. And I know, like, Michael Kist, he does, history sickos, he does fantasy sickos, he does like all of these different things. And I love that idea of basically being, even if it was, two different things, for me, if it's just like lit fic, because I don't read a ton of nonfiction. It's something I want to read more of. This being, we'll call it a newer thing for me. I'm still reading some of the more low hanging fruit with regard to myself as a reader and just the community that I've been lucky enough to develop. I want to kind of get more off the beaten path and start reading more authors, more titles that you don't see in this space all the time. So, like, the book I'm reading right now, Shantaram, I've seen like one other person mention that. So that's great, but I do love the idea of getting the Discord chat going, getting, doing the longer form, going kind of further down the rabbit hole and actually talking about the book in a bigger way. with regard to how it made me feel. Because, like I said, with these 2, 3 minute review videos, I can only share so much. And I want to be able to expand upon that, but there's also like when I hit 100,000 followers, people have asked about merch. Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I'm like so hesitant to do any of that kind of stuff. And in my head, I'm like, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to do, good, that goes beyond just this content, So just kind of started looking into, literacy programs in upstate New York and my surrounding area. And like, I've spoken briefly with like grassroots givers out of Albany, and they support literacy programs, and they're doing the work now. They're a nonprofit that is getting books into the homes that need them and just doing incredible stuff. So I've spoken with a few folks over there about the possibility of doing a campaign, and how can I support that, in a greater sense. So as far as the content's concerned, I do want to, expand upon that. But it isn't something that I fully fleshed out in my mind, but more basically, I would love to do, like, I know Josh does a lot of the articles. You write articles as well, or blog posts. I love the idea of doing that because I do love to write. And I love the idea of being able to talk about reading in a more general sense, as opposed to this is the book I read. This is how it made me feel, which I love doing, but also just kind of talk about the act itself and the importance of that. And again, like going on those deeper dives so that I can take that, that next step with these certain people that are already along the ride with me. And, how can we make this more community based so that we can really, like, I know that Tony and so many of these people, like, I plan on joining Tony's book club before I even consider doing my
Fantastic.
own,
Yeah,
and some of
fantastic
these other
spreading knowledge.
folks, just to kind of see how they curate that, because I know that they're doing unbelievable work, and
Yeah.
have a body of people and a community of people that are so well versed and have so much to learn from. Like you said, they've dictated a lot of the fiction that you've read.
It's
So,
actually
when I
crazy.
get
Like,
that from you, I see things that you post or Josh posts. I'm like, oh, I love that. I wish, but we're all our own thing. You know what I mean? And that's another little game you play with yourself of, man, I wish I could talk about that book like that, or I wish I was reading things like this, but we don't need to do that to ourselves, right?
yeah,
So I definitely want to see it expand into those different areas where it can be a more community based and kind of collective, for
no,
sure.
yeah, that's awesome. It's funny, like when Josh and I were talking on the episode that's coming out, we were talking about because I don't know if you listened to my episode with Claire, who I think is just absolutely incredible
Yeah.
and unbelievably smart. The reason I wanted her to be the first guest was because I very much believe in being in spaces where you're with people that are much more intelligent than you.
Yeah.
And she puts so much effort into her videos. And I'm like a caveman. Like I was telling her how I tried to put text on the screen and I deleted the audio of my video somehow. Cause and everyone's like, oh, like what camera do you use? And I'm like, I use my phone. Like I use my front facing camera. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I barely know how to use CapCut. I just bought a new iPhone. And again, this is like my anti-digital life that I'm pushing. Like they're like, oh, you can get an Apple Watch for free. And like, I'm like, dude, I have a watch. Like I don't need my phone on my wrist. She was talking about, like we were talking about how curated her work is. When I will post a book, if you're watching the video, I will have a clear sticky note on the back with like the
Uh-huh.
bullet points that I want to talk about. Cause that's how easily I forget stuff. I'm just like,
You seem like your retention is just ridiculous.
well, I'll annotate. So like I read for two different reasons. So I read, the Uncommon Reader, it's approaching literature through the lens of study. It's kind of like the tagline is for this Substack. And so I will read to study something, right? Like
Uh-huh.
because I want to understand it. So like right now our community is doing a 6-month reader's journey through the French Revolution. On the back here, like we're going through about 8 of these 12 books on the French Revolution. Every couple months we'll read a book, right? It's not like a monthly thing. We've been on this huge nautical kick, which like they love. I don't love it. I have like a fear of water and deep water, and
Yeah.
although my favorite movie is Free Willy, but like whatever. And so, that's kind of where that is. But yeah, I think it's important to do community based content. That's kind of where I want things to go. I think as a whole, like Josh just recently started his like disgustingly well read book journey, and it's going really well. And obviously Tony and Mike and Nick, and those are all inspirations. Alicia just recently joined Bindery, which I think Bindery is doing truly incredible work in the book space. And one of the things that you and I have talked about off the podcast more directly was the impact on young men and what that means for us kind of being voices that people take seriously, and
Mhm.
how we use our platform to be inviting and introduce, more young men to content. Like, I look at the one thing I love about Instagram is they have great analytics. And so you can see like the demographics of who's
Yeah.
watching your content. What's interesting is a lot more women listen to my podcast than men, but like a lot of men watch my content more than women, which is
Mhm.
fine, whatever. Young men are in this, like, I feel like we're in anti-intellectual era. We have books being targets of banning, books just being pushed back against. The vice president of the United States called college professors the devil. Like, it's things
Yeah.
that are dangerous to literature. And, I actually recently wrote an article on Substack about Tyler Childers is partnering with Libby, which on the surface is fantastic, right? Like, you're getting people to sign up for a free reading app at your concerts. Where I had a little bit of an issue with it is he named the first book for the book club, which was On the Road by Jack Kerouac. It just so happens that the name of his tour is On the Road. So what kind of led me down that rabbit hole was like, is celebrity involvement in literature a net positive, or is it like bad for literature? Like, I think Dua Lipa is doing incredible work with her Service
Yeah.
95 book club. But then you look at someone like Reese Witherspoon, she sold her company that she built off of the back of authors to BlackRock, which is heinously disgusting. And she also makes authors sign an agreement where she has rights of first refusal on movie adaptations of their books, which I think is
Okay.
also disgusting.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know either of those tidbits. That's
Yeah,
disappointing on both
it
counts.
right, exactly. But I think what Tyler Childers is doing kind of at the end of the day, I think is a good thing. But I think obviously there's some incentive there for his tour to be promoted. But I think at the end of the day, I think it probably is a good thing to get people interested in reading through a library
Yeah.
app. To not be more long-winded here, talk about the importance of men reading books, men's involvement in literature, and curating a safe space for young men to feel comfortable reading out loud.
Yeah. So I it's funny because when I started this page, it wasn't about that in any manner of speaking. Like I said, it was kind of more just an outlet for me, right? And a place to, originally I thought, oh, connect with other readers and, join in this community. And I've done that. People like yourself, like Josh, I mean, Alicia, like my friend Sarah, who's on here as well. And we have like very similar tastes in books. So many lovely, amazing, incredible people that I've connected with. But when I posted that one video that like the one that like went viral, and if you look at the analytics on that video, I got 50,000 plus followers from that video, which is crazy. And what that is it was basically, more or less 50,000, 40,000 men that don't read. I knew that, for me, for so many of us, so many people in my life talk about prior to my reading. And now that I'm doing this, they'll talk to me more about it. But, I want to read. So many people, I want to read. I just don't know where to start, So I was like, okay, here's an opportunity, I guess, to make it easier, right? To create some sort of gateway into that, because there's all of the things that we know, from a statistical standpoint, just as even if it's personal, about the fact that, reading reduces anxiety, and it also introduces ourselves to just different concepts and different viewpoints, but there really is, like, I've talked to my nephew. I got him Dungeon Crawler Carl recently because he spends all his time gaming. That's what he
Fair
does. And I
enough.
was like,
Yeah.
maybe this is that point of access. So within like the context of those videos that I've made, like the 5 books for the fellas, I've kind of tried to slowly move in a more literary direction, such that, like, and again, that's not because that's what needs to be done, but just because it started out as like, what are fast-paced, fun, engaging, page-turner books that like somebody who doesn't read and has a hard time focusing and doing this can sit down and, do that, right? And like, become engaged quickly. They don't have to muddle through 75 pages to feel as though they like are starting to care. There's just so much importance in it that has been, for me, so enriching since I started reading again. Because I mean, I'm a guy that I still love watching movies, I still love watching television, I still love doing all of these things, but you just garner a more all-encompassing kind of perspective, and it's just so much more immersive. I've talked about this with people as far as like adaptations are concerned. There are very, very few movie adaptations that can lay a finger on the book. I mean, I don't know, what are some of your favorite adaptations? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah. So I'm not actually a big movie guy when it comes to like popular movies. I watch a ton of documentaries, but I just watched White Noise, which had Greta Gerwig, Adam Driver, Noah Baumbach, who's Greta Gerwig's husband, directed. White Noise was the adaptation of Don DeLillo's work. I thought it was fantastic. Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson is coming out November 24th. That's got Joel Edgerton, William H. Macy. If you haven't read Train Dreams, if you liked
I'll
East of
check it out.
Eden, if you liked East of Eden, it's about a 115-page novella. It is absolutely beautiful. And Dennis Johnson writes about the people that are some would consider like the dregs of society, or the people that are just unlucky and have just really struck it bad in life. Like his short story collection, Jesus' Son, is about addicts and the decisions that they make. This book right here, Angels, by
Hmm.
Dennis Johnson, kind of like an LA novel. Dennis Johnson is a wonderful writer. And so that book's being made into a film adaptation. I don't know. I know East of Eden's coming out with a new TV show with the absolute love of my life next to my wife, Florence Pugh. Shout out Florence. If you want to come on the pod, always welcome. Um, so yeah, I don't really have a ton. I mean, obviously the Harry
Yeah.
Potter movies.
Yeah. 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 But yeah, kind of back. So you like just said back to like kind of the root of what you were talking about there. That was kind of a little sideline
Yeah, no, I love
curiosity.
it.
Young men, I think in particular, there's obviously this portrait of masculinity that exists, right? And I am a very emotionally available person and very willing and happy and find great benefit and kind of opening up and being vulnerable and being all of those things. But that isn't necessarily how young men or boys feel. And that's not how everybody feels in general. It's not just special to young men. I think there's just so like I read like A Prayer for Owen Meany but recently by John Irving, which I personally like adored. And it's showing these two kids going from the age of 10 into young adulthood and just encapsulates so many of the emotions and the insecurities and the fears and the triumphs and the fun and the silliness and just all of this shit that kind of encompasses the experience of being a young person, a young boy, a person in general, kind of moving into adulthood and trying to find your place, find your voice, and figuring out who you are in a world where people don't always feel comfortable talking about that with their peers or the people that are around them. And they're maybe not at the age where they're seeking therapy, or something like that. You can find that in books and you can find these characters that are having an experience that either mirrors yours or doesn't, so you can kind of feel seen by the characters in this book, kind of, oh my gosh, like here's something that I don't talk about with people because I'm a 16-year-old boy and we don't talk about that. It can basically allow somebody to find, a certain level of validation and comfort within their own skin and expand in that way, but also, reading about these other experiences. Like I used to work at a summer camp and I would encourage the kids in my cabin. I'd be like, listen, here we are all at this space together. And it's going to be so easy for you to just gravitate toward that kid that is just like you. He looks like you, he acts like you, and that's going to be the natural thing. Oh, you team up, you become friends with the people that are like you. But we're all here, this camp, Camp Dudley, amazing place, upstate New York on Lake Champlain. I challenged them always to like go spend time with that kid in your cabin, that kid on your team that you don't naturally gravitate toward or want to speak to per se, or feel like you have common ground with, because it doesn't take a lot of digging to find out that there is something, between the two of you that you can connect on. And reading these books for these folks, that don't necessarily have these conversations or feel kind of emotionally stinted, whatever, just aren't exploring that part of themselves, to be able to kind of see it in a personal setting displayed on the page and through the narrative and through the experiences of the characters, I just think is so intangible. So if it takes something like Red Rising to get you to pick up a book, but even in those books, there's so much emotionality. The third book in that series, which is the last I've read so far, Morning Star, there's so much vitality and human connection. There's still all those beautiful things. That just feels like a space that young people that otherwise might not connect with those parts of themselves or even explore it. They know it's there, but it's this indefinable thing inside that they don't know how to like place. You can find that in literature. And, that to me is one of the things that I find. And every book that I read that I love, I come across something of that nature. Like East of Eden, still my favorite book that I've read this year. There's so many different human experiences happening adjacent to each other within the context of that book. Most people, not everybody, it doesn't cover everything, but there's a lot of people that can read that book and pluck this character or that and be like, wow, that's really reflective of my experience in some way. And, again, as I'll reiterate, in a world where young men, boys, aren't bred to wear their heart on their sleeves and share their emotionality with the world, finding a place that you can experience that and encounter it on your own, I just think is incredibly valuable. So anything that I can do, and I consider myself very lucky to be in a position to have any impact, even no matter how small it is. But, all of these things are a ripple effect, right? Maybe this person gets to pick, their friend to pick up this book and whatever it might be. What a cool thing to be able to share that in some small way.
My wife's a teacher, and she also heads up the high school lit club. And she was talking to one of the I don't know, like the head of the lit club or whatever. And she was like, oh yeah, like my husband actually like creates literature content on social media. And the girl was like, wait, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, we would actually like love for him to come in and like talk to us about that. And so like that
Yeah.
was like super humbling. Another thing that was wildly humbling that happened to both of us. We were, and I like to say, me, you, and Josh were adopted by the Hudson family. I believe our Thanksgiving invite, I think we'll see each other at Thanksgiving at the Hudson household. Goldie Hawn,
Sounds about right.
Goldie Hawn, who I believe now I'm her adopted son, also followed me. That is something. There's a guy on, I don't know if you follow him, Faith and Fiction Book Club. He got followed by Chris Pratt. Josh got followed by Chris Pratt. And so
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
what are your thoughts when you get a follow from somebody that's wildly famous that like you're like, wait a minute, what I said was important enough for you to follow, like, comment? Like Oliver DM'd me recently talking about like book, like he asked me like why I annotate books, and we started talking about book recs, and I told him about Tinkers by Paul Harding, which is a book that I'm reading right now. And he's like, oh, after that explanation, I just bought it on Amazon. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
Like that's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. So as it pertains to Oliver, I went on a hike recently, and I came back from the hike, and I went to my messages and I saw Oliver Hudson there, and I was like, what did I message him? Because obviously he didn't message me,
Right.
And I was like, what did I was like, oh gosh, was I drinking last night? Like, what did I say to this guy? And he messaged me and basically just said, dude, I love the feed. I recently got back into reading, and we had a short conversation. I've followed him for years and like love him. So I didn't want to like try to overstay my welcome. Basically just thank you so much, dude. I really dig you. And like, whatever, kind of just kept it there. I mean, it's definitely an interesting thing. It's not like imposter syndrome. Like sometimes I feel imposter-ish, when certain people are putting credence in what I have to say. And I'm like, well, that doesn't need to be true. Like Cheryl Strayed followed me, who wrote the book Wild. And she's actually, that was portrayed by Reese Witherspoon. And Andrew Sorkin. Are you familiar with Andrew Sorkin? No, so he wrote the book 1929, which is about the big crash of the stock market in 1929. And he also wrote the book Too Big to Fail back in, I think, around 2010. And, he does very cool work. And I haven't read either of those books. I just got 1929. I think it's right down here. But he, I followed him because I saw that he followed me, and I was like, oh, this guy's doing cool stuff. And he messaged me and was like, I'm a big fan of yours. And I was like, well, that's just bizarre.
You're like, I'm sorry, what?
You're a fan of mine, So it's interesting. It's cool, like everything else. It's humbling, but at the end of the day, they're just, people that love reading like the rest of us. So, I think it's something.
He follows me. I just never followed him back. I guess, Andrew, I'm giving you a follow back.
There you go.
There we go.
But yeah, so, I try not to get too bogged down in that kind of thing, obviously, because it's like, yeah, it's just another human. Like Ethan Hawke commented on one of my videos. I was like, that's crazy. They're just other people like the rest of us that enjoy literature, that love reading, that see the benefit in it, the value in it, love and enjoy the fact. And, obviously we all get a little flutter of like, oh my gosh, like, that person took time out of their day. They've seen my face and they chose to follow or message or say something. So it's really cool for sure.
It is. It's such a wild experience. And, I've had the pleasure of Jill Lepore, who wrote We the People. I actually was asked by a bookstore here in Pennsylvania to come out to the event, and I promoted it. And I got to meet one of the state representatives who interviewed her. And so, like, I think it's just, kind of to that point, like content creation is provided opportunities that are really, really remarkable and otherwise just never would have been accessible to me. And, I had this guy who's a fitness creator, and he reached out and was like, I think it's so awesome that all you guys in the book space are so supportive of each other. Cause like, I'll put your video in my stories or like I'll repost it or whatever. And I'm like,
I think
yeah,
that same guy messaged me that same thing.
yeah. And I'm
'Cause
like,
he was like, "It's very competitive and kinda cutthroat in this particular part of" that's why, like, I've been grateful to end up in this space that is incredibly supportive. I post videos of yours or articles of Josh's and, videos by Kiss or this person or that person, and it just feels like a collective, you know what I mean? In a world where I think there's just so much wrong with social media, which again, you've mentioned this, and it feels contradictory to the fact that I create content,
yeah,
right? But this little corner of the internet, for the most part, I think is the goods outweigh the bads. There's toxicity here. There's bad here, just like there's bad everywhere. But that guy, I think he messaged. I'm just assuming because he
yeah, probably.
does that kind of content, and he said it's really cool that the folks in this community are very supportive of each other, and it is.
Someone came on one of my recent videos and was like, I'm so happy that your content has come across my feed recently because I found myself in like a really toxic side of book talk. And I'm like, yeah, listen, like I'm not here to be toxic. Like I'm here to get people to read books. I'm here to introduce people to works that I think are important. Yeah, I think that's just kind of like where things are for me as we kind of just cross the hour mark here. So with every guest, I have a question that I hold on to. I don't tell them what it is until the end. It kind of creates a little bit of suspense. It gets me to think about how I want to shape the question as we end the show here. I'm going to put you in a room, steak dinner, beer. It's you and three other chairs. You get one dinner with three authors to pick their brain, talk to them about who they are, and you'll never talk to them again. If you could have an hour with a steak dinner, some beer, some wine with three authors, who would they be?
Ooh, that's a hard question, Chris. All right, I'd probably go with Steinbeck. They can be dead.
Yes.
All right.
We'll bring him back.
Now, so it's funny. So as a little kind of before I answer this question, I will say that I firmly believe that the best literature I will read, I have yet to read. I there's
Agreed.
so much that I haven't yet encountered. And this kind of goes back to the, oh, I'm not that well read, conversation. So there's so much that I have yet to experience. And, this is a question I'd love to revisit in a couple years, right?
Sure, we certainly will.
But I'll say Steinbeck just because his writing is so steeped in Americana and was happening at such a fascinating and, just different time within the scope of our history. I would love to sit down and drink a whiskey with that guy and just pick his brain about his experiences. And just in a book like East of Eden, where he conveys so much with regard to,
Well, I would ask him if he hated Kathy Ames as much as I did.
well, I loved Kathy.
Really?
I mean, I loved her. I hated her as a
Yes,
human,
you're right.
but I loved her as a character. You
Yeah, that
know,
is true.
I, I'm a sucker for a female villain, if you will. And
True.
she's, which sounds, like, let's not misconstrue those words,
That's getting clipped.
but she's a towering force,
Yes.
that woman. And,
Yeah.
I respect her tenacity and her unblemished career of just doing her zero given. Like, I'm not gonna.
She is the epitome of the line, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I would love to sit down with Claire Keegan.
She was on my list.
I would.
What a wonderful human.
She's so lovely, and her books. She sees the world around her, and both from a human standpoint and just even like I don't know. There's this. Have you read Small Things Like These yet?
No, you told me to wait until Christmas time. So
Yes, perfect.
good.
Okay, great. But she can just take you through a landscape or something that is otherwise mundane. There is this little part of that book where he's, this isn't going to be a spoiler, but the character is waking up early on a Sunday morning to go do something, and there's snow on the ground and it's cold and the snow is crunchy, and he's just getting out of bed, and he's quietly getting dressed, trying not to wake his wife, and like, wants to give her a kiss on the cheek, but like, that's me, more for me, if I'm doing right by her, I should just leave her undisturbed. And just this whole process of like quietly dressing on a Sunday morning, and leaving the house and making like a cup of coffee, and going out in the snow crunching, and just the whole picture that she paints is so beautifully. So yeah, so Claire would be on that list, because I just can't imagine having a bad conversation with that woman. And just, she's such a treasure in my eyes. And let me look at my bookshelf for a quick second here.
There's two names I'm thinking of, and I'm curious if you're going to say one of them.
I mean, gosh, going back in time, I would have loved to have sat down with John Kennedy Toole, who wrote A Confederacy of Dunces.
But yeah, right.
That won't be my answer here. I mean, I could say there's like, I've read tons of Stephen King. I could say Stephen King, and maybe that could be one of the answers, simply because
I had Stephen King or Richard Powers for you.
yeah, I'll go with Stevie Boy, just
Yeah.
because I've read so much of his work, and he's got such an interesting brain. So many people, he's stigmatized as a writer, I think, and a lot of people stay away from his. You read 11/22/63 this year?
I am 350 pages in. It's something that I am just picking at.
But Stephen King, what I'll say about Stephen King is that he does, to me, incredible character work.
Yeah.
And his books, kind of like, for instance, like Joe Abercrombie, and like like the kind of contemporary fantasy realm. You have these people that write these books that are much more plot forward. Stephen King does seem to, for me as a reader, it's a great marriage between, the plot forward and the character forward. And, if you look at a book like It by Stephen King, yes, it's a horror book. It's all of those things that we know it is. It has that one wonky scene that we all talk about, if you've read the book. But it is such
So
an
this might
incredible
actually blow your
portrayal.
mind. I have the only book by Stephen King I've ever read is 11/22/63. I've never read any Stephen King.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
that doesn't surprise me, though, because that doesn't necessarily, I wouldn't like, based on knowing your content, I wouldn't be like, oh, I bet he's a big Stephen King guy.
I want to read
Um,
his book on writing. I think that's something that is on my purview. It has been on my purview. So I'm spiteful when it comes to buying books. Had a chance to buy 11/22/63 at a library book sale for $2, and I was like, I'll get it next time. It has not been there. So I eventually bought it for $25 at a bookstore on vacation. I went back this last time and I was like, ooh, It. And I was like, no, I got these other books. So now I will not buy It until I see it at the library bookstore again.
yeah.
But
No, I
at
get
at
that.
that book sale, they have like a whole section just for Stephen King books and like Michael Crichton, like those big sci-fi writers, and they go first. Like, so when you
Yeah.
get to this library,
Absolutely.
you have to be there at like right when they open for the,
Yeah.
because King goes first because people resell them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah. If I were gonna like point you in a direction of a King book, it might be like an apt pupil, which is part of Different Seasons, which is a set of 4 novellas that came out, I think, around 1986. And it has I mentioned earlier, like the adaptations. It has two of the greatest ever book to film adaptations in it, which is Stand By Me, which was originally The Body. The first story in that set of novellas is Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption. And The Shawshank Redemption is obviously, a highly beloved movie. But my favorite story in that is Apt Pupil, which is basically about a kid growing up in suburban California who becomes, engrossed and just very fascinated with the horrors that took place in Nazi Germany. And discovers a secret buried within the midst of his little suburban neighborhood, and, explores that. And it's very dark, but it's very fascinating. And I don't want to, I'm very much I don't want to say too much kind of a guy, because, for anybody that might pick that book up. But that's a good one. It's also, those are just digestible bites of Stephen King writing that exists outside the horror genre. The reason that I say that The Shawshank Redemption is one of the absolute best ever is because at no point really does it stray from the book.
yeah.
Like Game of Thrones. So many people love Game of Thrones. Yeah, go ahead. What do you got? What's that face?
So my story about Game of Thrones is funny. I never watched it. And then the final season was coming out in 2 weeks and a day. And I was like, and this is where my ADHD kicks in. All right, well, now I got to watch 6 seasons or whatever of this show in 2 weeks. I would be like in the shower and I'd have like my phone like on the top of the shower, like scrubbing my body, watching it. I'd get out and like wipe myself off. And so I went through 6 seasons of Game
Yeah.
of Thrones and caught. I finished the last episode the morning of the release of the first like episode of the last season,
All right. And
and
did you like it?
I liked it until season 5, and then it was
Okay, so what I was
garbage.
gonna say is it was good until it was beyond the books. The second it got beyond the books, it was very subpar.
Mhm.
And the reason I mention that is because when you've got a novel of any significant length, the movie's always going to have to paraphrase. It's going to make changes. It's going to take liberty. There's no way to really get it all in there. But Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption is a 113-page novella.
Yeah.
And almost verbatim, that movie is the book, like Red is narrating the book. And so there's really no liberties taken, and with the book, with the Game of Thrones, like that's why I use that as an example, because the second it got beyond the books, the show lost its luster. It was okay, it was whatever, but yeah, just to kind of digress, we're gonna go with John Kennedy Toole. Have you read A Confederacy of Dunces?
I have it. I have not read it.
I would suggest that you do, because I just really feel like you're going to love it. I mean, it's one of the most vile, horrible, disgusting, despicable characters that I've ever read in fiction, Ignatius J. Riley, but his mind is brilliant. Like, there are so many, just aside from just one-liners and quotable, like just the kind of perverse observation of the world as it transpires around him is so funny and compelling. It is the funniest book that I've ever read. So John Kennedy Toole might be that guy, like sit down, pop a couple hot dogs back, and just vibe. But we're gonna go with Stephen King, Claire Keegan, and John Steinbeck. So I will ask you really quickly. I know we're about to wrap things up. Do you have an answer to that?
I would have Clarice Lispector. She's an Argentinian Latin American author, just an unbelievably beautiful mind. I think someone that people need to read more of. She has this book called The Passion According to GH, and it's about this maid who sees a cockroach in the house that she's cleaning and obviously gets very scared, kills the cockroach. And it creates this complexity in her of, why is my life more important than this cockroach? Like, why did I do that? How do I have the power to take the life of something else that did nothing to me but scare me? You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
it becomes this story and unraveling of like, what is the power that we wield? Why are we important? What is the meaning of life? And so the way that she writes is just so vivid and beautiful and wonderful. So Clarice Lispector for sure. Someone that I'm getting into a lot is William T. Vollmann. He writes fiction, historical fiction. He writes some nonfiction. He does it like, so he has this book called Poor People, and he literally just like went around the world and was like, why are you poor? He has this collection of short stories where he approaches like what's the word I'm looking for, like confrontational type of people without an agenda. He's like, hey, let's just explore these people, right? And so I think that would be someone I'd want to talk with, but I'd probably pick Don DeLillo over him because I haven't read enough of Vollmann. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then probably Claire Keegan. Yeah, I think Claire Keegan is a beautiful human being. I would highly recommend watching like her interviews. She's so extremely soft-spoken and is intentional in the things that she says. Like the opener of this podcast is where she talks about empathy, and she says, I think sadness is important because understanding sadness and the way other people feel is what empathy is. And I think empathy, the world is nothing without empathy, she says. And I think that is a huge part of the mission that we've talked about on this show. And
Absolutely.
she's just a wonderful, beautiful person. Foster is, for an 88-page book, it is as powerful as a 1,000-page book. It is something
100%.
that
100%.
it's something that I want to read again and again just to re-experience some of those things. But yeah, that would be my 3. I want to grab a book because I want to recommend it to you, and I want to make sure that you see it. So let me grab it really quick.
Okay, perfect. Should I talk a bunch of smack while you can't hear me? Can you hear me?
Talk all the smack. That's fine. So
I was gonna say, man, there's so many. That question is so hard. Like Paulo Coelho, I'd love to sit down and talk with that dude. I want to talk to James Baldwin. I want to, like, there's so many people that I want to. But show me your book. Show me your book, baby. What you got?
What I think you should read and everyone should read is Tinkers by Paul Harding. It was his debut novel. It won the Pulitzer Prize for literature as a debut novel, which is okay. And it's about a man who is on his deathbed. It's over the course of 8 days, and he's recounting his life. Just the prose in this book is unbelievable. There are just so many sections in this book that I'm just like, who wrote this? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to read this little passage here. A late spring storm capped the last daffodils and the first tulips with dollops of snow, which melted when the sun came back out. The snow seemed to have a bracing effect on the flowers. Their roots drank the cold melt. Their stalks straightened from the chilly drink. Their petals, supple and hale, were spared the brittle coating of a true freeze. The afternoon became warm, and with the warmth, the first bees appeared, and each little bee settled in a yellow cup and took suck like a newborn. That is just
Yeah.
unbelievable prose, and it is beautiful. And then Clarissa Spector, Near to the Wild Heart. This is her
Okay.
first novel. They called her Hurricane Clarice because she was fierce in the way she wrote. And I just picked up her collection of stories, which is like a 600-page book. She typically writes like smaller books, like 200-ish
Yeah.
pages. But she's a wonderful, wonderful author. And so those are my parting gifts to you, is to read those books.
All right. All right. Well,
So
I love it. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah. No, but I agree with you just from that passage. It's humbling. I love to write and I love the idea of writing something. I've actually begun writing something, not with any, I'm not under the illusion that yeah, I'll finish it or will do anything with it. But, just as an exercise and in the process of doing so, much like my content creation, which at first I was like "Oh, this will be easy." And then you start doing it and you're like, "It's not easy."
no,
It's really not.
yeah,
And it makes you put a little bit extra respect on the names of those folks that inspired you in the first place. And you're like, "Okay, what you're doing is not so simple."
pretty
Not that I
good.
thought it was, but
Yeah.
writing need much even more so than that. It's a great activity for me to do that and also just makes me appreciate these people that create this art so much more
When
for
I
sure.
found out that on Stephen King, in Stephen King's book on writing, when he says that he doesn't outline novels, I'm like, what an absolute psychopath. Like
Yeah.
to have a story like 11/22/63 or like it, and you're not outlining that, like what a lunatic of epic proportions. Um,
That's an aggressive approach.
yeah, but I appreciate the time. Thank you
Yeah, thank you,
so,
man.
so much for being here. I certainly want to have you on future episodes. So tell everybody where they can find you on social media. I will also link all of Sam's socials and accounts in the show description. But yeah, where can everybody find
Yeah, so I am at Heady Reads. I'm Heady Reads on Instagram and on TikTok. I'm on Goodreads, but I am not very active on there. I maybe a couple little snippets here and there. It in no way reflects every book that I've read because I just, I haven't really quite gotten into it. But I am, I guess this would be the first announcement, going to join the Bindery community because a lot of people have asked, and it is Heady Reads on Bindery as well. And within the context of that, definitely going to be doing more deep dives, creating a more, just all-inclusive sort of experience. And it's gonna start out as, like a free thing. And I just want it to be accessible and, want to do the Discord stuff, want to do all of those things so that we can really kind of get into things together. But yeah, so pretty much Heady Reads, anywhere you want to find me, TikTok, Instagram, Goodreads, Fable, which I've never gone on, I don't think, in my entire life, and soon Bindery. And, thank you to Chris. I was very grateful and humbled when you asked me to be here. I look up to your content a lot, and just you have so much to say and have such a beautiful approach to what you do and just a great mission and just a great dude. So I'm very appreciative, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And we don't live too far from each other, so we'll definitely have to make time
Oh
to
yeah,
meet and grab a beer and have a good time.
let's do that, my friend.
Awesome. So we will talk to you soon, and I appreciate your time.
Cheers, guys.